In your job as a government relations officer or a public affairs officer, you're likely to come across the word public policy often. Now, what is public policy? Now, normally, when we say a policy, it is an officially accepted set of rules that govern how something must be done. So, in many institutions, you go and then they say, we have a policy on sexual harassment. So, it means that these are rules that govern how the genders must relate to avoid sexual harassment. They define sexual harassment in the policy, what constitutes sexual harassment, what will be done when there is sexual harassment, and what not. Or maybe they will have a policy on holidays and leave. All of those officially accepted set of rules that govern how something must be done is what we call policy. Now, if that is what a policy is, then what is a public policy? So, a public policy is a set of laws or regulations or measures which a government puts together concerning a given subject matter. So, when government makes a policy, because government policies are focused on the country as a whole, it is for all of us. So, we call it public policy. So, set of laws or rules that guide how something must be done in a country, we call it public policy. Now, I have given some examples of public policies that have existed in Ghana over the decades. So, you see the free education policy. Now, mind you, this free education policy is different from free SHS or the free senior high school policy, which is the last one on the list as you see over here. There's free education policy that was around Nkrumah's time. We have the ERP, Economic Recovery Program. We have had free maternal health policy and whatnot. We have had a lot of policies as a nation over the decades. Now, when you check, some of these policies are alive and they are online, which you can download and read. When we come to Ghana, we have a set of guidelines that we call the National Public Policy Formulation Guidelines. Now, this was instituted 5 years ago in 2020. That was when the National Public Policy Formulation Guideline was introduced in Ghana. Now, the why did Ghana find it necessary to have a National Public Policy Formulation Guideline? Some of the reasons were this. You will come across that there are a number of policies that have been instituted, but then when it comes to the implementation of the policy, you hear politicians say, well, there's no money for it. And then the question is being asked, if you did not have money for the policy, why did you put together this policy and institute the policy or christen the policy or launch the policy when all these things were not in place? So it was realized that some people were putting together policies just for the sake of being able to say, we came up with this policy or that policy. But then when it comes to the implementation of the policy itself, it was non existent because financial constraints. Sometimes, too, a government will put together a policy and we realize that the implementation arrangements are weak. What this means is they have put together a policy that this is what we want to institute in Ghana. But then, if they are to tell how this would be done or the processes it will go through for it to succeed, who is going to head this, If we are going to the various regions, who are the ones who are going to be responsible for this policy implementation in these regions? How are they going to be reimbursed? All of those things, when you ask them those questions, they have nothing to say to you. Then the question is, why did you go ahead to institute this policy or launch this policy? Sometimes you realize that stakeholder engagement is limited, which means that the government will put together the policy, but it doesn't really get feedback from the stakeholders that are likely to be affected by the policy they have put together. So you realize that the policy will be put together, it will be rolled out, but then the people who it's supposed to help really don't see how it is helping them, or they do not even have information as to why and how they are going to be included in this policy. There were also inconsistencies and duplications in policies. Somebody will say, "Oh, I've come up with this policy," and then they will collect all their funds, people will be hailing them, and then they will leave power. Another government would come and then institute almost the same policy, give it a different name, and then also ask that the nation applauds them for this. So, this and many others led to the National Public Policy Formulation Guidelines. Now, these guidelines are to direct policy formulators as to what is expected in policies in Ghana before they are accepted as a Ghanaian policy or before they can be passed. So, this National Public Policy Formulation Guidelines has come to, in a way, change the nature of policy formulation in Ghana. So now policies are not formulated haphazardly like it was in the past. If you are not able to prove where you're getting your funds or how it's going to be funded, who are the key actors, whether you have engaged your stakeholders and whatnot, then the policy will not be approved. So when you look at the public policy formulation guidelines, you would realize that it gives you certain steps that you're supposed to go through before or as you're developing or formulating a policy. I would encourage each and every one of us to have a look at the National Public Policy Formulation Guidelines of Ghana. And if there are any questions you would want to throw for our discussions, I would look forward to having discussions with you concerning this. Now, since we know now what a public policy is, what you ought to know is that there are types of public policies. There are types of public policies. We are going to talk about the four primary types of public policy. We will start with the distributive policies. Now, distributive policies are policies that basically distribute public goods and services. And when we say public goods and services, we're talking about so the nation has the nation's coffers or where all our monies go to. Now, these monies are used to provide goods for the nation and services for the nation. So, a distributive policy looks at how Ghana's money or the nation's money is going to be, or the nation's goods and services are going to be distributed across the whole population. Yeah. So the key thing here is as it distributes it to the whole population, it does not take anything away from others. Now, this is key because that is what differentiates a distributive policy from a redistributive policy, and you shall see that very soon. So, take for instance, the nation's leaders sit there and then they decide, we have to come up with a policy on how to distribute the nation's resources. Now, we need to develop our cocoa in the country. What can we do to ensure? So, you see, they are thinking of development. What can we do to ensure that we have more and more cocoa farmers in Ghana? Okay, we'll come up with a cocoa scholarship scheme. Now, the Cocoa Scholarship Scheme will seek to fund children of farmers when they fund the education of children of farmers, sorry, cocoa farmers, so that they would be relieved of the pressure of paying school fees and can excitedly focus on their cocoa farm, knowing that there's a scholarship for their children. So you see how they are distributing the goods and services of our nation. We also have things like free SHS, where they say people are going to school. Why don't we support their secondary school education by making the education or tuition free for them? So these are distributive policies. Oh, the road from Kumasi to Accra is not in a good state currently. We have to look at roads in the eastern corridor or the northern corridor of the country. Let us put money there and then. So they have a policy, or governments have policies on how they will distribute public goods and services. Now we go to the sister of distributive policies, which is redistributive policies. Redistributive policies has the intention to alter the socio-economic status of certain sections of the population, and usually it is the poor and marginalized. So, what redistributive policies do is that they look at the society and then they say, these people are impoverished, these people are poor, these people are disadvantaged, and because of this, we have to do something to bring them apart, or at least come up, make them better than they are now. So, redistributive policies take from one group and then give to another group. But distributive policies do not do that. Now, let me give you an example. Let us take progressive taxes. Now, when we say a progressive tax, we mean that the tax is in phases or in brackets. So, the more money you earn, the more taxes you pay. So, it's a progressive tax. What that means is people who are rich will be paying more taxes than people who are poor. So, the tax bracket is arranged such that if you're poor, you are not paying as much tax as people who have more or people who are rich. Yeah. So this excess money, they can take it and then they decide, let's just help this community. Sometimes too, you look at the LEAP program, or the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program. The government realized, I think this was in 2008 or so, the government realized there are a lot of impoverished people, especially in the northern part of the country. They said, what can we do? We need to have a policy that instructs government, or that directs government as to how to support such impoverished people. And part of the things that the government does is it can even give cash donations to certain families or individuals that, per how the policy works, they have been identified as very poor people. So taking from the rich, giving to the poor, taking from the haves and giving it to the have-nots. So basically, you are redistributing. So the distribution has already been done, but now you are redistributing so that there can be some form of balance in the society. So policies that ensure this happens in the society, we call them redistributive policies. And then we have regulatory policies. Now, regulatory policies are policies that are to maintain order and prohibit certain kinds of behavior that can endanger the society that we are in. So, you would find that the government has policies that are restricting citizens from doing something, or it will restrict organizations from taking a certain action. So, example, environmental policies. So, we have laws that, or sorry, policies that restrict organizations or miners or whoever from mining in certain identified areas in Ghana, or from um, these lumbers, people who are cutting down trees, that you cannot go to this area or that area. It is reserved. These are